One of my favorite features is the attack path analysis for people that have public-facing applications. That's huge. Like,
welcome to Blue Square Security 2024. This month we're talking to Chad Paquette from Difenda. They're an award-winning partner. Chad is a cloud architect, and we're talking not just cloud security, but we're talking platform security, and we get into Defender for cloud and multi-cloud security. I hope you enjoyed this month's episode, and thanks so much for tuning in. All right, so thank you again for tuning in to Blue Square Security. This is our first episode for the calendar year of 2024. And today we've got a guest from Difenda, one of our trusted partners. And Chad is joining us today from Toronto. So Chad, welcome to 2024 with Blue Square Security.
thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
So just give us a quick background of who Chad is, and then give us an update as far as, for those that don't know who Difenda is as a partner, as an organization. What type of customers do you guys serve? Do you have a vertical that you hone in on, or do you have SMB customers? Just give us an overview of who you are as a company as well.
Sure. So essentially, I started off my journey as a developer and with a big interest in automation. And then I found myself being pulled towards the infrastructure side of things, which I kind of fell in love with. So continued on with being, that on-prem guy everyone knows about as far as, storage, VMware, that sort of thing. And then cloud just boomed. And with my developer background with automation and infrastructure, it was kind of a match made in heaven. So I was able to kind of progress there, started on AWS, and then kind of went multi-cloud, learned Azure inside out, and kind of still doing that today. Now I'm on the security side as far as platforms go, which is always fun and a struggle to, kind of stay ahead of the bad actors, but makes things interesting. And as far as Difenda goes, we're a SecOps as a service company. As you mentioned, partnered with Microsoft. Our security operations team, they create custom managed services powered by the Microsoft security platform with 24/7 coverage. And we also have a professional services branch to just help out with various customer engagements, from multi-cloud security posture to things like implementing Entra ID with PIM properly, just to focus on best practices when it comes to security design. So we have various types of customers in education fields, public sector, media organizations, all sorts of stuff. So it makes things very interesting. Got to stay on your toes, and kind of, each use case is different, which makes things really interesting. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Very cool.
Chad, thanks again for joining us. It's awesome to have you as our first guest here in 2024. So as Greg just discussed, obviously we partner with Difenda a lot here at Microsoft, and we know you guys won the Microsoft Security Impact Partner of the Year Award 2023. Can you just talk a little bit about what that award is for our listeners, and then kind of what it means to Difenda to have won that award?
Yeah, no, that was huge for us. So for people that don't know what that award is, Microsoft gives that to a partner who strives with innovation in their product, who has cybersecurity expertise. And I think one big important part is goal alignment with Microsoft. So we're fortunate enough to have a good feedback chain to Microsoft as far as products. So if customers give us feedback, or we notice trends or anything that can be improved on products, we have a great two-way communication with Microsoft on that. And when it just comes to pushing those best practices as a security company, there's a lot of alignment there. So for us, receiving that award was big, and shows that we're a big player in this field, and we're going to keep striving with that innovation to deliver to the customers. So that's something we're stoked about for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. The hope here today is that we can kind of steer this conversation into a cloud security conversation, and I guess as a tipping point to getting into the kind of the meat of the conversation, and to highlight what you guys as a partner do a little bit. Um, what are the specialties that Defenda brings to the table as we relate it to cloud security? Obviously, your background is a big major part in what you guys bring to the table, but as a company, as a partner, what do you guys bring to the table when you just hear the word cloud security or multi-cloud security?
Yeah, one thing I would highlight definitely is we're heavily on automation. So, for example, we have a product called Arrow, which we use to automatically triage any cases or incidents that are created in Sentinel. And we have, automatic triage, which is huge. As we know in the security world, as incidents come in, the time to respond to those is critical to kind of reduce that blast radius. So I feel like that's a big innovation we have as far as that goes. I would also say something we do that I don't really see too many competitors do is because of our experience on multi-cloud and architecture, we also provide best practices on some architecture for applications as well. That's something where we'll kind of help out with if people say, okay, well, I have, a web server I need to protect, or I have an API gateway I need to protect. How do I do this? What's the best way to accomplish that with our requirements, right? So we help customers kind of go through that. And I think that and just our overall SOC is just killing it. So I think that's probably some of the items that really separate us for sure.
That's awesome. The You mentioned the MTTR, the mean time to respond. That's one of the talking points that we hear about and we talk about and we present on quite a bit. And one of the statistics that I've seen over and over again is a number of 72 minutes. And it's an hour and 12 minutes, which is the mean time. So the average time across however many organizations we've surveyed or polled. Do you find that when you're interacting with customers that they can confidently tell you as the boots on the ground, somebody that's helping your customers, do they know what their MTTR is, or is that something that they're looking to you to concretely help them to identify a mix of the two, or do you have experiences like that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's kind of a mix of the two. Some organizations are mature on the security side, but want to have a SecOps as a service because of the management involved, or just so they can kind of dedicate those resources to other things. So they have an awareness and they are aware of those metrics, whereas some don't know at all. And we're glad to help those people out and kind of show them what we can do and build custom use cases around incidents that would come in. So, for an example, one of our use cases is if a user gets popped. So we have automated triage that can go in, disable the account, rotate keys, whatever's necessary. But if the customer says we can't do that on this account because it's a C-suite guy or whatever the case is, we can kind of work on those cases and implement custom rules. That's just like a trivial case. There's a lot more, but so yeah, to answer your question, I'd say it's a mix of the two. It's a great topic because it's for me as a security guy, that's what's paramount is having playbooks or understanding what to do in those situations. Because if you don't, you're going to scramble and there's going to be a lot of damage done. So I feel like keeping a clear head, having documentation or automation of playbooks on what to do, these are the steps you should go through, makes things a lot better for everybody because we want to obviously, limit the amount of damage that is done for sure for companies. So it's a battle, but yeah, it's interesting for sure.
And documentation is one of those areas that I think we could probably have an entire episode dedicated to, where my experience has been when I go into customer environments that 9 times out of 10, it's a lack of documentation. And the ones that have good documentations typically have, a better security posture. So
Right.
Is that an area that you guys consistently help with as far as obtaining documentation, providing documentation, or at least guiding, how that process should be rolled out?
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas we really pride ourselves on, especially for professional services engagements, is everything is documented. We're flexible. We'll implement for the customer with documentation or walk them through scenarios on how to implement themselves because I I personally like the latter where I like it when customers are like, I want to do this. I want to learn how to implement these things with your guidance. I find that goes a long way for people to kind of, build their skills and have confidence working with us. But at the end of the day, everything's documented, A to Z, everything. We want to make sure that everything's repeatable if necessary. If for some reason things need to be stood up in a different region, whatever the case is, everything's documented properly, and they know what they're doing there. So yeah, I think you're right. That's a huge um, thing where typically architects are like, I'll just document it later, and that never gets done. So I think
Yeah, and I don't
delivering that
think it's
is
ill
key.
intention. I think they're
No, it's not. Yeah.
overworked or wearing multiple hats. And I think a lot of the times they do have the intention of going back and documenting it. But I mean, the world of security is so fast paced that you're always multitasking, or at least it seems that way.
And I don't know anybody who loves doing documentation. I don't know about you guys, but
Special breed of
You
people.
find them, let me know.
yeah,
Like to meet 'em.
exactly, right. I mean, maybe auditors or something like that, but but
The
yeah, not
CPA
me.
crowd.
Yeah, but it's necessary, and like it's something that you've got to do. Where to your point, you'll never get to.
Somebody at my old audit company that likes to do it for sure. So Chad, as you've been doing, cloud security now for a little while, and obviously we're still in the cloud adoption age. What have you seen the biggest security challenges that your customers in general face as they migrate more and more to the cloud?
Um, Observability is one for sure, because what happens is you'll have people just lifting and shifting, putting stuff. They just got to get there, the cloud, and the controls aren't there, or they don't know what they have deployed. I'm pretty sure if any platforms people watch this, they'll understand the struggle that, um, you know, you got to have those guardrails in place. Otherwise, people will just deploy all sorts of stuff, and then it's very difficult to keep track of. So I feel like that's one of the areas that are heavily brought up, are guardrails, because to me, it's a fine line between you want developers to do their work, you want that speed to market, but you can't compromise controls along the way. So I feel like people that invest in those guardrails, it goes a long way because things are getting deployed securely and you're not impeding people from doing work. Because I'm sure you guys know, in some organizations, security is always looked at as a hindrance and a blocker. And I feel like if you work to remove that and kind of work with teams and set up guardrails to enable more automation, then those teams are more likely to work with you. So I feel like, basically, to answer your question, yeah, like those guardrails are a piece I notice missing a lot, and people just don't know how to attack those. So that's something where we would come in and kind of guide them on that. So
That's an interesting point. We've talked about this in internal meetings, not so much on the podcast, but just internal security meetings. When the consensus, either from an organization or from a team, maybe not the whole organization, but when security is looked at as a stumbling block or a roadblock or a speed bump, how can Defenda or how can Microsoft or how can we together combat that negative view? Because in my opinion, not that my opinion holds a lot of weight, but in my opinion, security should be, dealt with from the CEO down. And unfortunately, that's not the norm today. And you hit it on the head when you said it can be looked at as a hindrance, and it is. And I get it. Security products are expensive. I get it. They're cumbersome to deploy or to integrate. I understand all of that. I'm not naive to the fact that it's difficult and the bad actors are they only have to be right once, and security has to be right all the time. Like, I'm not naive to those
Right.
facts, but how do you think we either collectively come to the table, or you as a partner come to the table, to make or help the security teams, you know, not look as bad, or not to be looked at as a speed bump? Because it's certainly not our intention, obviously.
Yeah, and that's a great question. It's definitely a struggle. For example, one thing that I found extremely useful is, for example, a service like Azure Policy, right, where you can kind of set up some guardrails, get the developers to play within that, box, if you will, and then kind of take the hindrance aspect out of there. Uh, Also, to your point about, yeah, the security products is a great one. I personally will say this. So, coming from an AWS background originally, when I saw Microsoft Defender for Cloud, I was actually blown away because I was like, wow, this is a single pane of glass for multi cloud. It consolidates so many products. And I feel like if you demonstrate that value of something like this, it might get people more on board and more willing to kind of understand the value of it. For example, just the DevOps scanning piece for secrets, that sort of thing. That's an ongoing battle as well that today people are still facing. I remember going to um, an event where they were demonstrating putting like access keys in GitHub in a controlled environment, and within 5 seconds they were already popped. It's just mind blowing. So I feel like that's another thing is you don't want to scare, like, for example, C-suite people and say, you got to do this, you got to do that. But I feel like if you show these little examples, it'll help them at least work with you on implementing those controls and kind of working with you with the dev teams. But it's a battle. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that perfectly because it's a
No,
struggle.
it's
And like
it's
you
a tough
said,
one to answer, and it's almost
yeah,
like a loaded question. And I guess as I hear you explain that, like, as a security seller, right? One, you take that word of seller, and somebody that's in a position to buy can look at that as a negative, right? I mean, sales is a necessary evil, unfortunately. And our job of trying to convey the correct message in a way that is not threatening, and then again, not using the scare tactics in
right,
the world of security, is a difficult task all in itself, because unfortunately, when things happen, when breaches happen, or logos make the news, those are stories that we want to put in front of our customers and say, look, here's what we understand about this breach or this incident. Here's what we understand that could have been avoided. Can we look at your environment to see if there's areas that we can strengthen your security posture or tighten some of the gaps? So yeah, it's a loaded question to begin with, but it's an interesting take to hear you to talk about. And then I guess the flip side of that coin too, and to make our job as sellers a little bit more difficult, is you try and have to avoid the buzzwords. And I heard single pane of glass, and I heard you talk about low code. And when I hear low code, I think shift left. Shift left and single pane of glass, coming from my perspective, the seller side of the table, those are buzzwords that you try and avoid at certain times, but you have to convey that message in a real world example. I say all of that to put a question in front of you of, do you think Microsoft has done a good job putting a platform approach in front of customer? Because we're competing against pretty much everybody out there that's in the market that has a platform. Is our go-to-market strategy resonating with your customers? Are we coming to the customers as a platform provider, or are we still looked at as just a software vendor, which is what I hear quite a lot?
yeah, you nailed it. That's an interesting question because uh, time and time again, when we try to demonstrate, for example, Defender for Cloud, as soon as they hear Microsoft, they say, "Oh, I thought this was for Azure only," or "I thought this was for." So I feel like showing and demonstrating that goes a long way. As far as the service itself, so for example, I'll compare AWS has guard duty for, intrusion detection. I still think, even though that is native to AWS, Defender for Cloud is still better than what AWS offers natively from what I've seen. And like I said, I started on AWS, and don't get me wrong, they still have a great service offering, but from a security standpoint, I was just blown away by the capabilities of the Defender for Cloud platform, and I feel like that needs to be kind of explained to customers more and just showcased. I think that multi-cloud aspect needs to be showcased a lot more, and people are going to start really seeing the value of it because you mentioned earlier, like security tools and deployment. Sure, but then managing all those is a pain as well, and some of them need dedicated teams. In the SecOps world, some could require their whole team for a certain product, which is not really achievable nowadays. So something like Defender for Cloud needs to be showcased for that. I strongly agree that the platform needs to be definitely showcased a bit more for the multi-cloud aspect, and that's what we're trying to do as well with our customers is push that notion that it's not just Azure, it's not just Microsoft, it's more than that. So
Yeah.
And when you encounter customers, obviously Microsoft's pushing, like Greg just talked about, the platform approach, not just with Defender for Cloud, but with everything. How do you validate to customers that decision of best of breed, which is what we see a lot, versus the platform approach? When there seems to be, I can pick a lot of holes in a best of breed approach, but yet people still want to go with it. So how do you kind of go about helping them validate that decision of, hey, the platform is the better way to go?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we will definitely showcase the product in a live environment, or even help them in a limited capacity set it up for free in their own environment, and kind of say, hey, this is the value you see firsthand. Because we all know demos are nice, demos work, well, you pray to the demo gods, but you know what I mean. But yeah, you know how it goes. I always think of that blue screen of death there during the I don't know if you guys remember that back in the day where they were showcasing, I think it was it Windows 95 or 98, but there was a blue screen. Yeah, right. That's pretty much yeah. But
or
anyway,
the Tesla truck one's a good one too. I don't know if you've seen that one where it's the bulletproof glass and he throws the brick through it.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious. Yeah. But I feel like, like, for example, we'll go the extra mile and help them configure it in their own environment so they can see the data coming in. They can see how it related to their environment. And I feel like Microsoft's done a great job there of having that free 30-day trial on Defender for Cloud. So you can kind of have a look, see what it does. And that's a long enough time span for you to actually see the data come in, see your vulnerabilities, your cloud posture. So I feel like that's something that we'll do is just go in there in the customer environment, provided there's interest, and set it up for them, or just do a demo in our lab tenant or something like that. So that's usually how we would go about it.
And that's one of the questions I hear quite a bit from customers too, is that they are seeing that 30 days is sufficient. There are instances where we have to extend those times from 30 to 60 days. But when done properly and when done broadly, 30 days, you're going to get enough data in there to where you're going to see there is value in this. And there's things that you've overlooked, and it's pretty blatant in your face as far as that reporting is concerned.
Yeah, 100%. If it's just you'll have those people that just turn on and think, oh, that's it, and just sit there and then let it go. But yeah, as far as like data collection, one of my favorite features is the attack path analysis for people that have public facing applications. That's huge. Like just seeing how someone can move, in your environment laterally, whatever the case is. Having that information is huge. And to your point, going back to the question about how do you show this to the CIO and so on, if you have a nice graph like that shows this is how it's easy for them to understand, and they'll more likely be willing to, work with you to block those holes. And so I think there's a lot of great features on there that will assist with that. So yeah,
But I
definitely
think that's more than just, C-level speak too. I think
true.
that's
Yeah.
prudent for so many people that just visually learn. And I think if you're going to be in IT and you're drawing out maps as far as what the network looks like, you've got to be able to quickly explain, look, we found it here, it started here, it moved laterally here, and also disseminate that data down to the people that are going to do the remediation. So a quick, easy depiction of how it came to life and how it impacted the company is good for a pictorial representation too, to quickly disseminate that to your team so we can go act. I mean, that it comes back to that 72 minutes. We're trying to identify, and if we can be below that mean time of 72, we're doing better than most. But I did want to circle back just a little bit. You spoke at the very beginning when you were talking about Difenda as the organization, about your automation piece. How important is automation and orchestration in the world of cloud security, and how does that directly tie into kind of diminishing that time of 72 minutes?
Yeah. One thing where I will say it excels having automation massively is it's deployed. So the code is a source of truth. There's, when there's drift and you don't know what's deployed, that makes things more challenging from a response detection as well. So, for example, probably some developers will hate me for saying this, but in like a pre-production or production environment, I'm a big proponent of read-only access. For developers, pipelines push everything. That's the only thing that should be able to change code, which keeps that source of truth active and makes it easier or predictable to know what's there. And from a response capability, that's huge. As well as it's kind of dicey though, because you've got some automated response where, let's say, a storage account gets compromised and you need to rotate the key. Well, that's going to break your application, right? For whatever's using it. So there's like a give and take there as far as like, use cases and what you can do. But I think just having that automation is key to meeting that 72-hour window. Especially if you have the pipelines ready, it's also from a deployment and remediation standpoint, you can get that out to many resource groups, let's say, quickly. Whereas if you're doing things manually, good luck kind of remediating that, right? Like a good example I can give you was Log4j. How many applications had that vulnerability in multiple places? And fixing it was kind of simple for most apps, but so at my previous spot, we were able to kind of deploy the fix everywhere in an automated fashion with full coverage, and nothing is getting kind of left behind. So I think the automation
That's
is
a
key
pretty
for sure.
impactful statement. I mean, Log4j was a global, impact, and to be able to automate a response on an incident like that is, I mean, that's a big statement. That's kudos to you and your team for being able to do that.
Yeah, no, it was it was a nasty one. It's one of those ones where everyone drops what they're doing and has to kind of take care of right away. I mean, also the application teams deserve some credit too for doing some very quick testing with the fix to make sure nothing broke. I mean, those are rare to have those sort of vulnerabilities come out where everyone drops everything and kind of, takes care of it right away. But, it happens. And I think you've got to be ready for it, right? If something like that happens, have your pipelines ready, have your deployment method ready, and just understand the impact it's going to have if it gets out in the wild like that. So
No, I think that bodes well for one, whoever it was that you were, dealing with too. But I think it also highlights the fact that so many organizations are not aware of the generations of attacks that are coming. And I think the Log4j, I think if memory serves me, that was put into the generation 4 type of attack. And to kind of give it some breadth and depth here is like a global impact, like NotPetya, you know, it could be considered Gen 5. You know, basic malware stuff is Gen 1, and that evolvement of attacks continues. I don't know if they've got a Gen 6 now. I think maybe they do with IoT. So maybe they're on Gen 7, but understanding the types of threats that are out there, the fact that they're evolving, and um, like I said earlier, they only have to be right once. We have to be right all the time. And you hear it over and over that security is a team sport, but I mean, you said you had to give kudos to multiple team members. It truly is a team sport. And if we can't effectively communicate when these things take place and disseminate that data quickly, and that's 72 minutes, that's not a long time, an hour and 12 minutes. I mean, shoot, if it happens overnight,
Yeah,
somebody's on
I've seen
vacation,
really,
whatever.
yeah, oh, 100%. I've seen interesting models too, like where some companies will actually have a SecOps team member on the development team. I don't know if you've ever seen that before. I thought it was kind of an interesting concept.
No, it's smart.
I
It's strategic. I like
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, I was always kind of like, wow, that's a pretty good idea. Um, like I'm sure some of them were probably like, oh, this is hindering development and we're slowing everything down. But at the end of the day, no, it's like you said, it's a team sport. It's you don't want to shove it down their throats, like you're saying, kind of, and no one wants to be production ready and then at change approval time have some security guy be like, oh, did you scan it, and here's all your vulnerabilities, sorry, you can't go production. So catching that early on in the process is definitely huge because like to your point, team sport, it's not a siloed battle. It should never be like that. We need to kind of work together for sure.
No, it's paramount, and it kind of gets me thinking too. Like, I hate to keep using these buzzwords, but listening to you talk, and maybe it's just because we're just gabbing here a little bit, but it sounds like Defenda is in a position to help people implement zero trust strategies, or at least have that planning type of conversation with customers. Is that something that you guys try and bring to the table? Is a zero trust mentality? Is that one of the talking points that you try and have with customers when you sit down with them?
Yeah, it's interesting because we definitely explain the model to them, and then some of them already know about it or don't, and then kind of make an informed decision afterwards on how they want to proceed. Um, it kind of varies, I would say, all over the place as far as what customers want to do, but that zero trust model is definitely something that I think is beneficial. It I've seen it occurrences of it where it could be um, not a hindrance, but can cause. I don't. So, for example, kind of zero trust in a sense where, let's say, I don't know if you've ever seen people try to implement like SSL decrypt, for example.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever seen that. So that's one of those things where a kind of funny story is few places I've went to where they've implemented that on like workstation networks, and within 10 minutes they turn it off because people can't access websites and they're just freaking right out. So it's kind of funny from that perspective. Um,
Well, it
but
takes
yeah,
time for it.
it's
I mean, it's not turn it on and it works perfectly. It's a learning curve, obviously.
yeah, exactly. And people don't really want to do that sort of thing. But um, it's kind of cool though. Like things like TLS inspection that you can have on the firewalls. There's a lot of cool features to take advantage of. Definitely a lot to implement when it comes to that, but it's fun. It's like you're saying, it's changing all the time, and you got to stay on your toes, right? So, yeah, I'd say it's a good approach. Not for everybody, but it's something we would push for sure.
No, as humans, change is not something that we run and hug. I mean, we typically are adverse to change, especially in the world of IT.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but I think if you show value in what you're trying to change, and the key is making things easier for people, right? Like I said, automation and pipelines. When people see that step, they're going to be more likely to implement or at least adopt what you're trying to throw. So I think yeah, it's tough, but you got to do what you got to do to keep the world safe, right?
Yeah,
True.
exactly. So we got a couple questions left. So on this one, share as much as you want. Code names are fine. The goal of this podcast is not to get Chad in trouble. So, so as we talk about helping customers, can you share maybe some examples of some success stories that Defenda, along with Microsoft's cloud security solutions, have and helped customers?
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest things we have, which I was impressed by when I joined here, is our forensics investigation capabilities. So obviously, you hate to get to that point, but it does happen where there is something that slips through the cracks, and you kind of need to figure out what's going on. So we had a pretty large customer that got breached, and our investigation process was kind of blew me away as far as, especially on the automation side. So there's only maybe a couple of manual things done as far as connecting the customer's data and some forensics information, and then we spin up a forensics environment in seconds with Terraform. Kind of go in there and put the data in and kind of help the customer understand, here's how you were breached, here's what they took advantage of, here's the logs that show what happened. And I feel like the benefit there is kind of helping them close those gaps and showing the value of some of these products and tools we were talking about today. So I feel like just getting customers to that I can sleep well at night knowing my public applications are not going to get breached or whatever is huge. So I'd say that was one of the biggest success stories for me, was just seeing that forensics investigation side of things, because as I mentioned again, um, it's hard to keep everything locked out, and you're going to get a breach possibly if you have controls that are in place. So I feel like that was pretty impressive on the forensic side. That was pretty cool.
It's always unfortunate when we talk about breaches and when people are affected. But on the flip side of that coin, it really is, from our side of the table as a manufacturer and your side of the table as a partner, it is fascinating to learn how these things take place, and it gives us a better position to, play better defense and maybe get on the offense a little bit when it's all said and done. And again, I'm not making light of anybody's breach or anybody's event. It's always a tragedy when that happens. But what we learn and what we gain from it is so impactful and necessary evil, I guess. So we've got one final question, and this one is a fictional question. So, put your thinking cap, hypothetical hat on. Last year, we did 12 episodes, one each month for 2023. And at the end of every episode, we asked, sorry, that was 11 guests, 11 episodes. And we asked all 11 guests the same questions. And then the 12th episode was a culmination of all those answers with the same question asked to 11
cool.
different guests. So this one is going to be very, very similar. If you had the power to enforce one cybersecurity rule globally, what would it be, and how would you try and make sure that everybody enforced it?
Just flip everything off on your network, and then there's no breaches.
Buried under the ground.
Kill the internet.
Yeah, there's no traffic. There's no. That's a great question.
I just see this big switch coming.
You just lost my vote for president.
I feel like something that gets the least amount of attention that might be the most impactful are IAM controls. I would say that's where I would start, is making sure access is proper, people have the right access, access is provisioned in an automated way if possible. I would start there, because everywhere I go, IAM is always a mess. People don't know, they don't never clean it up, they never know what permissions there are. I would say, as a global rule, I would say having an IAM strategy would be key. That would be one I would definitely implement for sure. Because yeah, like access is, how often is access, leaked credentials or is a breach method? It's one of the most common ones, right? So I feel like that's where I would focus, is making sure there's a proper IAM strategy in place that people are adopting. That's I think the road I would go down.
That's not where my head was going when we first came up with this
Great
question, but
answer.
it's such an insightful answer and,
Yeah.
so true. I bet we could probably find some stats around IM that would shock most organizations. So fantastic answer. So for those of you that are listening, we do have a cloud security webinar with Difenda coming up at the latter part of March, March 21st. I will put a link in the episode description for that webinar. Wanted to thank Chad for being so gracious with his time today. If somebody's looking to get in touch with Difenda or maybe wants to learn more about the forensics that you were just talking about, what's the best way to get in touch with Difenda?
I would say just go to our website and just use the contact method there, and someone will get back to you really quickly.
Is that difenda.com, .net, .org?
Right. Yeah, difenda.com. Yeah.
Difenda.com. Okay, cool. Well, Chad, thank you for being
thanks.
so gracious with your time here today. We appreciate it. We appreciate your partnership and look forward to working with you and the rest of your team on some customer interactions in the near future.
Great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Chad. Yeah, appreciate it.